Good morning. My name is Andrew Hallman, and I'm currently serving as a senior advisor at the Central Intelligence Agency. Prior to that, I served as principal executive at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It's an honor for me to be speaking to you today, particularly among such a distinguished set of fellow speakers. I'd like to thank the University of South Florida, the National Defense University, and Central Command for inviting me to be part of your conference. This is another great opportunity to collaborate with experts in the field of national security and educate the public, our decision makers, and the heroes who will be fighting on the front lines of the digital battlefield in both the public and private sectors. Now, I'm neither a technologist nor cyber expert per se, but I do have many years of experience in the application of technology to intelligence and national security, and I've led large workforces in this space, including in standing up CIA's Directorate of Digital Innovation in 2015, and in my last assignment as the number 2 at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. My remarks are shaped naturally by my perspective as a career intelligence professional. I'd like to begin with a perspective on how I see the global threat landscape affecting the business of intelligence and the challenges as well as opportunities for emerging and disruptive technologies in the execution of our global mission. Now, if I could make only one point to you to frame how to think about the implications of technology for our national security, it is about technological convergence, in particular the intersection of technological advances with our human cognition and the challenges and opportunities that presents for our competitiveness against near-peer and regional adversaries. Indeed, the national security threats we face, which are increasingly represented within this digital domain, are growing in number, range, speed, and complexity. New technologies are increasing connectivity, the speed and volume of information, and the pace of change, all challenging 20th century political, social, and economic structures within and between states. We face enduring strategic threats posed by some nation-states because of their economic clout, military strength, and aspirations for greater power, in particular China and Russia, the very subject of this conference. The great game is no longer confined to the ranges of Afghanistan, but is being played out with our adversaries and their proxies around the world. But power has become more diffuse among states and non-state actors. We face political and social upheavals fueled by individual empowerment and militant surrogates of nation-states, such as Iran, as well as the continuing scourge of extremism and terrorism. We face shifting power dynamics within states and among them. The power to destabilize no longer rests solely in the hands of nation-states or terrorist groups, but with individuals and groups who can quickly mobilize mass movements with social media. The exponential growth in data and disruptive technologies has been a tremendous force for good, but it has also led to the democratization of the means by which others can do us harm. Increasingly, we are in conflict within this digital domain. As our distinguished speakers and panelists make clear, we face a growing cyber threat, not just from nation-states, but from their surrogates, who are operating in largely ungoverned cyberspaces to demonstrate the mere access to reach out and touch us, to collect intelligence on us, to steal our intellectual property, to disrupt and deny services, and even put our nation's critical infrastructure at risk. These cyber actors are aided by the commercialization of offensive cyber capabilities, where one can sell, purchase, and trade destructive tools and methods in the dark web cyber arms bazaars. This has created the insidious effect of putting market forces to work for the bad guys. As has been apparent, particularly within the past few years, we face an existential battle for truth in the digital domain, fueled by malign actors' attempts to put at risk our most cherished institutions of democracy, in our daily political, economic, and social discourse, and in our electoral process. Our adversaries' efforts to inject synthetic content into genuine organic social media dialogue distorts reality and has an insidious and profound effect on what we see, interpret, and ultimately act on. These distortions play on our natural cognitive aversion to believe we can be fooled, and they challenge our ability to discern true manifestations of legitimate debate and create second and third order effects on other discourse. This ultimately strips us of our hard-won rights to make well-informed decisions that shape our destiny. This is simply unacceptable. The creation of data that is realistic and believable including video, audio, images, and personas, even replication of broadcasting sets familiar to us, is becoming more sophisticated, automated, and accessible by the general public. The strategic national security implications of such a ubiquitous weapon system are vast. Russia, for example, has used multimodal platforms and media campaigns to leverage the trust in established platforms and amplify with bots to subtly sow societal divisions. In effect, Moscow is trying to tear the fabric of our democratic system by degrading our ability to turn public discourse into policy formation and norms. Moscow employs a destructive approach because it knows it can't compete equally as a rising power. China, by contrast, seeks to project its own ascendancy relative to the U.S. and to weaken the ability of detractors to check its rise. This offense requires not only a technological defense, but the education of the public to become more discerning consumers of information, to strengthen the immunity of our social and political discourse to manipulation. This is a whole-of-society challenge. I can't think of a more grave threat to our nation, and this should enrage each and every one of you and call you to proverbial arms to defend the values we share. At the same time, we're operating in an intensely competitive intelligence environment. The changing nature of these threats and of the information landscape is challenging our traditional approaches to intelligence. Our established business model for intelligence is built around shaping collection strategies to find answers to specific questions and reveal secrets denied to us by our adversaries. Now, this will always be an enduring feature of the business of intelligence, but this operating construct on its own is inherently limiting. Cognitively, information discovery is bound by the limitation of our assumptions, imagination, the creativity of the questions we ask in determining intelligence need, and by our own situational awareness. Temporally, the old task, collect, analyze, produce cycles cannot withstand the accelerating rate of information, nor can it keep pace with our policymakers' needs for rapidly assimilating intelligence into their often short decision-making cycles. Speed is at a premium. For most of history, intelligence has been about collecting scarce data. Today, the age of information abundance, we face a new challenge: to find meaning in high volumes of data that can help us detect, characterize, and counter threats, and to operate clandestinely in highly sensed environments. Now, in consideration of all that, let me offer some thoughts about what this means for our intelligence business and the critical relationships we have with other agencies of government and increasingly with the private sector. Now, it helps that I'm a pathological optimist, but I believe we are in an environment of expanded opportunity with the means to reconstitute from data our adversaries' actions and intentions, to exploit them and convey it in compelling and sophisticated ways. This has significant implications for how we detect and track threats. In the dynamism of the global order, I would argue that we need to build our anticipatory intelligence posture to improve the IC's peripheral and long-range vision, to help our policymakers decide where and when to allocate precious national assets among many competing priorities. We can apply what we know from several decades of social science of the correlates of global instability to produce models of complex adaptive systems, instrument those correlates, collect the data generated by that instrumentation, ingest and condition that data at the speed of collection, and apply advanced algorithms to generate forecasts of changing conditions. In the most advanced forms of this analysis, we strive to move beyond correlation to actually understand causality, which is where we can provide the most value to decision makers seeking to effect more favorable outcomes. We can develop a greater global sensory capability that enables the data to tell us what is emerging, one that is not solely dependent on the creativity of the tasking we levy on our collection assets, and enables us to discover the unknown unknowns. By integrating multimodal intelligence sensors and automating their tipping and queuing to provide persistent coverage of strategic threats that enables better change detection. To identify and contextualize new developments and patterns underlying global trends and their implications for national and shared interests. To detect subtle shifts and discontinuities that may portend future disruptive events and/or present opportunities for policy. Now, this is not a new requirement, but it's one that puts a greater premium now on the speed with which we can help intelligence consumers cope with uncertainty. And as decision-making cycles become shorter, action-reaction cycles are faster, and the implications for any one decision can be far greater than ever before. Arguably, the stakes have never been higher. In my view, we're at an inflection point for our intelligence tradecraft. The contours of this digital battlefield on which we conduct the business of intelligence is becoming defined by the democratization of emerging and disruptive technologies and the complexity of the information environment. Now, when you think historically of the weaponization of aircraft, like other transformative weapon systems, this led to an offensive-defensive cycle with which we are still living. Since World War II, we've continuously developed new radars to target aircraft, jammers to defeat the radars, and electronic countermeasures to overcome the jammers. Today's digital battle space will require the same type of continuous evolution and adaptation, but at an even faster pace. As we saw in the 2016 Grand Cyber Challenge, supercomputers hunted each other in real time to defend themselves, write self-healing code, and exploit their adversaries' weaknesses. This machine speed increasingly will characterize the nature of our digital battlefields, and we'll be fighting dynamic adversaries as they employ adversarial AI to deceive, manipulate, and compromise our ability to observe, orient, decide, and act. Technological convergence, in particular the intersection of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science, is reshaping how we think about our competitiveness against near-peer adversaries. New generations of mobile networking and communications networks and rapid deployment of smart sensors that autonomously gather, analyze, and act on data present tremendous opportunities for humankind, connecting us to transportation and electrical grids, public works, telecommunications, e-commerce, and financial systems. But they also present larger attack surfaces for threat actors seeking to exploit vulnerabilities. And for the authoritarian regimes we're discussing at this conference, they offer the means to surveil private citizens and political adversaries. This has profound implications for the CIA as a human espionage organization, whose operational tradecraft is affected significantly by the operating environment as well as the tools and techniques of our adversaries, particularly those of our near-peer adversaries such as China and Russia. With the rise of smart cities instrumented by multimodal sensors, contested by our adversaries who are employing similar technologies, you can see that we're engaged in a digital and cyber street conflict in highly sensed, digitally immersive environments. This places an imperative on a rapid assimilation of disruptive technological capabilities into our business of intelligence. We can leverage the exponential growth in computing capabilities to power artificial intelligence solutions that automate high-volume, repetitive tasks and apply advanced algorithms to find meaning in data, and ultimately enable a higher-order human cognition and intelligence tradecraft. For optimization of tasking and collection for platforms, sensors, and assets in near real time, and integration of their collection through automated tipping and queuing. For rapid ingest, processing, triage of high volumes of diverse data, including in foreign languages. For rapid data exploitation to inform operations in real time. For object and pattern recognition to identify new adversaries of interest and detect changes in placement, movement, and behaviors. For predictive analytics, including sensing, detection, and mitigation of counterintelligence and cybersecurity threats. To improve our analysis with deeper and more accurate insights. For example, as our adversaries become more sophisticated in integrating synthetic content into organic social and political discourse, equivalent to malignant cells strangling a vital organ, we need to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning to isolate the inorganic signal and attribute it. And with this, ultimately enable the surest guardian against deception, our ability to apply our higher-order human analysis, our ability to resist confirmation bias, to think independently and assess information with rational detachment at the speed of mission. Data is the new tip of the spear in an age of expeditionary intelligence. Increasingly, the edge over an adversary, our operational advantage, will be determined by the speed with which one can sense, collect, ingest, condition, analyze, and characterize data representing the threat, and ultimately act on it. This means developing and maturing the digital capacity of mobile platforms, interoperability, real-time sensing and data integration, and real-time signature management. Computing at the edge at the point of mission execution is increasingly important. This is particularly true for CIA and our defense partners, given the high operational tempo at the edge and the digitally immersive environments in which we operate. The ubiquity of sensors and computing power in an emerging 5G environment, coupled with rapid advances in artificial intelligence, presents growing challenges for our ability to operate clandestinely. And our competitiveness as an intelligence community will increasingly be defined by the speed with which we dynamically assimilate these emerging and disruptive technologies into our intelligence tradecraft. Extended reality technologies, including increasingly sophisticated augmented reality and virtual reality platforms, offer opportunities for us to simulate real-world events, particularly how we operate in highly sensed environments. Our intelligence officers benefit from VR-enabled training to help them practice dealing with surprises, condition for real-world environments, develop muscle memory, immerse in a foreign language, and practice their professional skills. Now, I share the views of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence that autonomous machine-to-machine integration will require new concepts for human-machine teaming that optimize each. And I think it is in this machine-human interface where we will revolutionize our performance as an intelligence community and compete well head-to-head with our near-peer and regional adversaries and ultimately prevail over them. There are much broader institutional implications. We need to develop a system of systems approach to unifying the assets of our nation to defend against and counter the growing complexity of threats facing us. We need to optimize the IC. We need to develop an IC-wide ecosystem, one that applies reference architectures to enable a diverse community to scale. Much like private sector managed services, each IC element has a specialty, a differentiated value that can be leveraged for the collective, but it requires reference architectures to make the ecosystem work. We used to think that co-location was integration, but it's even more so now about interconnectivity. Interconnecting platforms and ecosystems across the IC is where digital transformation and value at scale occurs. For the IC, a well-orchestrated, optimized community would be system agnostic in collecting intelligence, an integrated architecture that can efficiently and effectively allocate the right assets to the right priorities without bias for one discipline or another. In other words, the best athlete plays its position. Systems that tip and cue sensors in real time, driven by artificial intelligence that provides change detection. We need to think in terms of whole-of-nation approaches to accelerate the speed with which we apply disruptive technology to countering the threats of our nation and the shared interests of our allies. This means developing more agile means of rapidly introducing and assimilating advanced digital technologies into the community's mission. Developing internally only that which has little or no commercial analog or must be adapted to operate securely. We need agile digital platforms to conduct our work. The raw materials, processing capacity, and innovation needed to derive intelligence value will often, and I would argue increasingly, be on commercial platforms. I consider these agile digital environments the circulatory system, or to borrow another physiological analogy, the central nervous system of the intelligence community. And our intelligence missions depend on the health and well-being of these environments. If our networks, our digital infrastructure, represent the IC's circulatory system, you can consider data our lifeblood. The challenge for the IC is to separate the wheat, the data of value, from the chaff by leveraging commoditized commercial platforms with tradecraft that will obfuscate intelligence methods. The IC needs a digital continuum with the bulk of the processing occurring on tradecraft-protected commercial platforms that leverage the accelerating pace of digital innovation. In practical terms, the IC must continue moving toward an architecture that provides for a stable foundation. At the same time, it enables incorporation of innovation through microservices at the higher end of the stack. We need to make better use of virtualized work environments. COVID has shaken us to the foundations of our social conscience, but there is opportunity here. Before COVID, work modalities focused mostly on physical segmentation of the workforce to manage large organizations, a classic approach and one that still has some use and value. But we didn't get full use of our workforce because this approach left capacity and expertise on the table. We lack full knowledge of where our workforce's skills reside. Employing talent on demand just in time is stymied by analog approaches to managing people. COVID has presented a sudden imperative to virtualize our work environments and make it mainstream. The future of work is now. Given the pace of digital innovation, we need agile acquisition vehicles. Historically, our extended budget cycles and highly regulated acquisition within the government has challenged our ability to keep up at scale with innovation and technology. Particularly at the upper end of the stack, we need agile acquisition based on flywheel approaches that engage innovation at the speed of commercial industry, without locking us into protracted proprietary arrangements or monolithic government-only solutions that limit our ability to pivot with disruptive technologies. Now, many large vendors do this as a matter of course, partnering with other best-of-breed firms that makes this digital ecosystem responsive to the user's needs. We need to learn how to manage risk holistically. This includes evaluating the risk to mission of standing still, of not innovating, of becoming static targets. I'd like to close by again thanking the University of South Florida, the National Defense University, and Central Command for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's exchanges like this that contribute to my optimism that we will compete with and prevail over our adversaries. It's my distinct honor to serve with you to that end. Thank you.